Hey guys, this is Miss Vinson. Today we're going to talk about the resource or the factor market. Do you remember the circular flow model that we learned at the very beginning of class that we said was the blueprint basically for the entire subject of microeconomics? Well, remember that circular flow model. We had three major players. We had households, firms, and we had the government in the middle. And households and firms interacted in two different markets. So in the product market, the firms were the sellers and the households were the buyers. But remember, in the resource market, the tables were turned. In the resource market, now guys, the firms are the buyers. They are the demanders. They are demanding labor and capital so they can make the goods and services. Households are now the sellers. Households are selling their labor and they're selling some capital. So households are now the suppliers. Firms are now the demanders in the resource or the factor market. Now, a lot of the concepts that we learned when we were talking about the product market can be flipped and used in the resource market as well. First off, let's keep it simple and say that the only resources we're really going to focus on is labor and capital. And today we're just going to focus on labor. Now, the demand for labor is something called derived demand. The demand for labor, how much employers want to hire people, really depends on how much people want to buy that product that's being made. For instance, let's say that the demand for apples goes down. How is that going to affect the number of workers needed for those apple farms? Well, if people don't really want to buy a whole bunch of apples, then you probably don't need to hire a whole bunch of workers. So a decrease in the demand for apples would lead to a decrease in the demand for the workers that work on apple farms. If there was an increase in the demand for hamburgers, then all of a sudden there would be an increase in the demand for all of the factors of production necessary to make the hamburgers. So an increase in the demand of a product leads to an increase in the demand for all of the factors of production that go into making that product. So the demand for labor in an industry really depends on the demand for the product that the industry is producing. That is called derived demand. We've talked about how a firm knows how many units of output to produce. Remember, they're going to produce at their profit maximizing output level, which is where MR equals MC. We have a similar idea in the resource market. But instead of trying to figure out how much stuff a firm is going to make, we're going to try to figure out how many workers a firm needs to hire. And this is really going to be based on three different things. First off, how much does it cost to hire these workers? How much are your workers producing? And how much is what they're producing worth? How much can you sell that stuff for? So let's go back to a chart that we've seen before when we worked productivity measures. Notice that our first column is the number of workers we have. It's our labor. Our second column is the total amount of stuff produced by these workers. So notice that when there's just one worker, 5 things are being produced. 2 workers are making 11 things. 3 workers are making 16 things. 4 workers are making 20 things. 5 workers are making 23 things. 6 workers are making 25 things. And 7 workers are making 26 things. Now that's the total amount of output being produced by all of those workers when they're working collectively together. Let's figure out the marginal productivity from hiring each additional worker. So what we're going to do with these numbers is figure out how much extra stuff did that next worker contribute to our total output when we hired them. So notice that when we hired that first worker, our total output went from 0 to 5, so that first worker gave us an additional 5 units of output. That second worker contributed an extra 6 units of output. That third worker only contributed an extra 5. That fourth worker only contributed an extra 4 units of output. Are they just a bad worker? Nope. Things are just starting to get crowded. There's not enough tools to use. There's not enough jobs to do. So we're starting to experience diminishing marginal returns or diminishing marginal productivity. A fifth worker only added an extra 3, the sixth worker only added an extra 2, and that seventh worker only added an extra 1. So we see diminishing marginal returns. Now we're good with that. Let's try to figure out how much each of these workers is worth to the company. MRP, marginal revenue product, is the value of the stuff that was added by that worker. Suppose this is a t-shirt company and they can sell these t-shirts for a price of $5 each. So the first worker contributed an extra 5 t-shirts, and the business can sell those 5 t-shirts for $5 a piece. So the marginal revenue product of that worker, the value of the stuff added by that worker, is $25. Now the second worker was able to contribute an extra 6 t-shirts, and each one of those t-shirts can be sold for $5 each. So this second worker helped this business earn an extra revenue of $30. The third worker was only able to contribute an extra 5 t-shirts. Well, the business can sell these 5 t-shirts for $5 each. So this third worker only added an extra $25 in revenue for this company. The fourth worker was only able to make 4 t-shirts, so the fourth worker was really only able to contribute an extra $20 to this company's revenue. The fifth worker was only able to contribute an extra $15 to the company's revenue because they could only make 3 t-shirts. The sixth worker could only make 2 additional t-shirts, so they only contributed an extra $10. And that seventh worker, by the time we hired the seventh worker, it was so crowded they could only contribute and make an extra 1 t-shirt. So that seventh worker only brought in the company an extra revenue of $5. So notice how we're finding the MRP, the marginal revenue product. We are taking the extra stuff, the marginal productivity from another worker, and multiplying it by the extra revenue that we can get when we sell those units. So how many workers should this t-shirt company hire? Well, we need one other piece of information. How much each of these workers cost. Let's say each of these workers costs $10. So the wage is $10. Well, let's compare that. That is called the marginal factor cost. How much extra it costs to hire that next factor of production, which is labor. So your wage is your marginal factor cost. We're going to compare how much we're paying for each of these workers with how much revenue each of these workers is contributing to our company. Okay, let's say we hire the first worker. First worker costs $10, and when they make 5 t-shirts, they're bringing in an extra revenue of $25 for our business. Sounds like we want to have this first worker, right? The second worker, we're paying that second worker $10. That second worker helps us make $30 more, and we are only paying them $10. No brainer, that second worker was worth it. The third worker, we're paying them $10 as well. Well, they're making 5 t-shirts, so they're bringing in an extra $25. So if they're bringing in $25 for our company and we're paying them $10, that's a good worker to hire. The fourth worker can only make an additional 4 t-shirts. So when we sell those 4 t-shirts, we're making $20 in extra revenue. And we're paying that fourth worker $10. We're still going to hire that worker. The fifth worker can only contribute an extra 3 t-shirts. So that fifth worker can only help our company bring in an extra $15 in revenue. We're paying that fifth worker $10 in a wage. So our company is still bringing in more money from that worker than what we're spending on them for their wage. Now the sixth worker can only contribute an extra 2 t-shirts, which means they're only going to be bringing in an extra $10. Well, we spent $10 on that worker. Should we hire that sixth worker? It's really up to you. It's really up to the business. You're not losing any money on them. They're bringing in just enough to cover what you spent hiring them. Now let's look at the seventh worker. The seventh worker was only able to contribute 1 extra t-shirt. When you sell that t-shirt, you're only bringing in $5. But you have to pay $10 to that seventh worker. So that seventh worker is not worth it to hire for your company. So if we want to know how many workers a company should hire, we want to go all the way to where your marginal revenue product equals your marginal factor cost. You want to hire all the workers that are going to bring in more revenue than you're spending on those workers. So the marginal revenue product is basically the value of what those workers are contributing to your company. And the marginal factor cost is the extra factor cost, how much extra it costs to add that factor of production, which is going to be like your wage. So you want to go all the way to where MRP equals MFC. So this is a good introduction to the resource or the factor market. We're going to talk about this even in more detail in later videos. So until then, see you next time.